Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today's March 24th. Yeah, it's great to have you all here. We're just kind of getting things underway as kind of looks like we have a few more people coming into the room. So looks like it's going to be a really good turnout today. So wanted to provide an official welcome to everybody today. My name is Shane Osborne. I am the Business Development Manager for the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. And yeah, we've also got Michelle Ratcliffe, who's kind of driving our Zoom bus today as the tech person. So she's in the background, and there she is. And yeah, so before we get going with some introductions and some shameless plugs, I just wanted to acknowledge that we're gathered virtually today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people, and we honor their history and culture. Excellent. Well, firstly, I wanted to thank Associa, British Columbia, for they are a sponsor of our Business Smarts series. They are a property management company here in British Columbia, and we really value and appreciate their support of the business. And today's Business Smarts webinar topic, as you all know, is cybersecurity. We're going to be hearing from Garland Sherratt, my apologies, on this really relevant topic, not only for businesses, but for personal as well. So I wanted to acknowledge our President Circle sponsors who make all of these events possible. Huge thank you to Integra Savings, UBC Okanagan, Rogers for Business, and MNP, Myers Norris Penny Accounting Consulting for their support. Also, big thank you goes out to our affinity partner, TD Benefits, which is runs the Chamber of Commerce Group Insurance Plan. It's the #1 extended benefits program in the country. Excellent. So some shameless plugs real quick. So obviously, you know, COVID-19 still top of mind. We've got resources via our OkanaganWeGotThis.com website. So those resources can be found as well by hashtagging OKWeGotThis with latest news, updates, resources, and success stories from our members. On this site, we can really keep you and the business community updated on issues and initiatives that are aimed at fostering a positive business environment that's ultimately going to lead to a stronger and healthier Okanagan communities. Last chance to register for our Building Resilience to Thrive program. That is around so that you can develop world-class customer and employee experiences. Our final cohort actually just started, although late registration is going to be accepted until this Friday. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. And then if you're like many of us right now, finding your HR resources really just stretched to the limit, join us next Tuesday, March 30th at 11:30 a.m. for a special session in partnership with UBC Okanagan and Okanagan College to help connect you to student talent. And I'm sure, you know, everybody out there wants to have some students working, doing maybe some diverse projects that you've been meaning to get to. And then also we've partnered with the World Trade Center Vancouver to offer an Okanagan cohort of the Trade Accelerator program, which is called TAP for short. Your chamber membership could connect you to a $4,500 bursary to participate in this program, which starts April 6th. This is really for businesses looking to expand their exporting business. Give us a shout at our Kelowna offices if you'd like more details. And then along the same lines, we have the Export Navigator program, which is really for those businesses that are wanting to export but have not yet begun to export. Think of it like Exporting 101. If you're interested as well, connect with us after today's session. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our presenter today, Garland Sherratt. Garland is a senior ICT and information security professional with rich experience in both the technical and business aspects of defining, designing, developing, securing, managing, and promoting ICT products and services. Welcome to Garland, and over to you.
Thanks, Shane. So I'm really happy to be here today. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I've done 14 different talks. This is the 14th talk I've done in the Okanagan since I got here 3 years ago. This is the first one where I'm going to talk only about password managers and two-factor authentication. So it's a little bit more focused, and that should give a little bit more time for covering the depth of how important these things are. If there are two things you must get right in the world today, the digital world today, it's how you use passwords and how you use authentication and use two-factor authentication. So that's the whole scope today. I'm going to talk a little bit about user security awareness. You'll see that's pretty darn important. And also, I've included a chart on the next level. So what are the things you should do after you've got your passwords down pat, two-factor authentication? What else is there for your organization to do? I'll mention that, go through that briefly. So no cybersecurity presentation is complete without a good chart of the threats. The threats are pretty scary. They're very real and very scary and increasing. And businesses fail because they don't properly prepare for the threats they face and don't take the proper security measures. So the two measures I'm talking about today are among the most important you can take, and definitely the ones you should address first. So what are the big threats? Ransomware is a big one. Phishing, business email compromise, and something you may not see more too clearly or may not be aware of is improperly using cloud services. Of course, everyone's using cloud services today. So I'm not going to go through these threats in depth because I have so much I want to talk about in the password managers in 2FA, but I want to point out that the mitigations or the way you address phishing, among the most important are a password manager, 2FA, strong passwords, and user awareness training. And then for business email compromise, and if you don't know what that is, you should learn. Again, the same two really important mitigations address that. And cloud services, the same thing. Among the mitigations, again, are the two I'm talking about today. And I have to mention ransomware since it is the biggest threat to organizations today. There are additional mitigations that I'm not going to cover today. They're there in the charts. But user awareness is a big one in mitigating ransomware as well. So if you absorb nothing other than one chart of my presentation, this is the one you should absorb. I've tried to show what people are doing wrong today, the vast majority of people and users, and what they should be doing. And this really is the whole focus of this presentation. So people they're using passwords that are too short, they're too simple, they're common words like their dog's name, especially things on social media. Most importantly, they're reusing passwords between accounts. That means they're using the same password for more than one account. That's a really bad thing. Or they have a really simple system of a base fixed password and then they append on some suffix or prefix. People are storing passwords in their heads, pieces of paper, a file on their computer. They're typing passwords or pasting them into login forms, into web browser login forms. They're not using two-factor authentication. And people are tending to use SMS type 2FA where they do use two-factor authentication. SMS is texting. So that's 2FA by a text message. Those are all the things that you should not be doing. They're awful things for your security. And I'm going to talk about how to fix all that. So first about passwords. So why do you think that organizations want you to have such crazy little complex password rules? You have to mix capitals and lowercase and digits and symbols. Why do they do that? They do that because most people choose really bad passwords. They pick their dog's name and slap on the digit 1, and they think that's a good password. Or most people just don't even think about it. All they want to do is create the account, they create the dumbest password they can find, or they reuse the same password on their 30 other accounts and take it away from there. That is really bad idea. So organizations are trying to get people to pick better passwords. That's why they impose these password rules. So why are bad passwords bad? So if my password's too simple, it's pretty easy. If that service where I've used the password gets hacked and someone steals this file called a passwords file, which has the user ID and the password side by side in nice little pairs, it's easy to crack that if the password is simple, and they can reverse engineer the file. It is hashed, it's kind of garbled. They can reverse engineer and get the password out of it, and then they can try that password on 200 different web services. And if everyone reuses passwords, which they do, they're going to be able to break into all those other services just from that one little hack of one service. You can imagine that's a pretty bad thing. That's called credential stuffing, which is a big risk because everyone reuses passwords. And passwords are easily phished. If I cause somehow, like an email, a web page, doesn't really matter, a login form to suddenly appear on your computer that looks like Facebook or LinkedIn or your bank, most people are automatically going to start typing in their password without any kind of verification. They've just been phished because it wasn't a real login page. And passwords make that really easy. People keep the passwords in their head. They see a page that looks like their bank's login page, and they start typing the password. Now, that's the insecurity side of passwords. Why are passwords a security problem? But passwords are also a convenience problem and a pain problem for users. People forget passwords. They get locked out. They can't access their passwords when they're traveling or on their cell phone or on their other computer. They're having to share accounts where they do share accounts by actually sharing the password itself with people. And people know that they can get phished. Hopefully everybody's heard of phishing by now and they know it's a pretty big problem. They know they can lose money. Their accounts can be taken over. They're afraid of losing that piece of paper they store. So passwords are also a source of stress in people's lives. Or I should say bad passwords are a source of stress in people's lives. So what is a good password? A good password is strong and unique. So strong means as random as possible, and why not make it random? In fact, when I pick a new password, I always choose a 30-character random string, and they're unique. Every single account you own, without exception, has a different password. You never, ever, ever reuse a single password for anything. Your passwords are stored in the cloud. That's even better because then no matter what device you're on, if your house burns down, your passwords are still there. Your password's available on all your devices. That's the convenience side of it. They're not in your head. They're not on a piece of paper. You never type or paste your password into a login screen because you can get phished that way. And a good rule is if you can remember a password, it is way too simple. Now, there are a couple of exceptions for that. Obviously, you have to remember the PIN or the password to get into your computer or your cell phone. And you have to remember a password manager master password, which we'll talk about. So how is this convenient and how is it secure to have really good passwords in your life? So if your passwords are strong, then they're impossible to crack, and those credential stuffing attacks don't work. You're also not vulnerable to password spraying attacks, which is a whole different type of attack using weak passwords. If your passwords are unique, credential stuffing doesn't work. If you use this special feature of password managers called Password Manager Autofill, then you can't be phished. And I put a little star here because you can still be phished if you make mistakes, but the default out of the box is you're not going to be phished. And we'll talk about that. And if all your passwords are stored in a cloud password manager, then you can log into an account from any of your devices. You can't possibly forget them. You can't possibly get locked out of your accounts. You can't lose your passwords by losing the piece of paper or the file. It can't be stolen. If your computer suddenly goes up in smoke, you haven't lost anything. If your building suddenly goes up in smoke, you haven't lost anything, burning all your equipment. And you can share passwords with other people without even having to give them the password itself. So any quick questions before we move on?
If anybody that would like to pose a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then I can then ask Garland your question on behalf of yourself.
I'll wait another 15 seconds. We've got a lot to get through today. Type quickly. Okay, let's move on. So that was about passwords. What's a good password? What's a bad password? Part of using good passwords and using passwords in a good way is using a password manager. It is really difficult to properly manage your passwords without using a password manager. And you don't get all the benefits I mentioned of good passwords if you don't use a cloud-based password manager. So let's walk through this. A password manager is going to give you not only security, which you know you need, but maybe you don't really care enough about, but it's also going to give you convenience. And that's the thing that I keep harping on. Once you've used a password manager for a month, you're going to wonder how on earth you ever survived without it before. It simplifies your life so much. So I hope I get this across. Having a password manager is a key foundational thing to have for your security. Not only does it help secure all your accounts, but it also gives you a place to store secret information, confidential information, sensitive information securely on your computer. The fact is that if you have a Windows machine, which most people do, most Windows computers do not have full disk encryption. If someone steals your computer, they pop the hard drive out. They can read every single file on your drive, which obviously could be an issue, right? A password manager gives you a place to store things securely because it encrypts its little database of data. So what are some really good cloud password managers for you to use? LastPass, 1Password, and Bitwarden are really good ones. Bitwarden has a free tier. LastPass used to have a free tier, but in fact, their free tier now is practically useless. So Bitwarden, people say it's a little bit harder to use. It's pretty darn good. LastPass and 1Password are the two biggies, two of the top three that are used on the planet. They all have different tiers. So if you're an individual or you have a small business or a family or a big business, they all have different tiers for all of them. Any of those three you'd be quite happy with from the convenience point of view and quite secure. LastPass has a feature I really like called emergency access, which the others don't. I tend to prefer LastPass. If you are really scared of the cloud, and I hope to show you why you shouldn't be. If you're really scared of the cloud, then there are also non-cloud-based password managers like KeePassXC and Strongbox. There's a whole bunch of other ones. Those two are pretty good. Strongbox is mobile version of KeePassXC. Now, I encourage you not to use password managers built in browsers or your operating system. It's not that they're bad, it's that you get locked into the ecosystem of that particular supplier. And you'll see also, I mentioned in the next chart, there's not as much attention paid by security researchers to those other password managers. If you're already using them and you're comfortable with them and they meet all your needs, keep using them. But if you're not using a password manager yet, don't start with one of those. Start with one of the independent third-party password managers like the three I listed. I should mention as well that I will give you at the end my email address and you can ask for the charts if you want. So you don't need to write everything down. You can just try to pay attention, understand the concepts. That's the really important thing. So how do you use a password manager? First of all, you install it in all your browsers that you use and all your mobile devices. You then create a master password, and I'll talk about that in the next chart. And you create that master password and you use that to log in. You use it first to create an account, and then you log in to all the other devices with that master password. And now because of that master password, all those apps on all your different devices are now syncing through the cloud, but your database is empty. You don't have any actual entries in your database yet. So your password manager maintains a database of your credentials in the cloud. So a typical entry would be kind of the name, like Facebook, the URL of Facebook, so the password manager knows where to go to open the login screen, your user ID and your password for Facebook, and then any notes you care to add to the entry. And you could have one entry in your vault, your database, you could have hundreds. I probably have 300 or something. The password manager will sync that database between all your devices, and I'll show you in the next couple of charts why that's safe. When you log in to a new website that's not in your database already, the password manager will notice that from your browser and will pop up a little message saying, do you want to save this in the database? If you save it, you're done. It saved it in there with all the information you need to go replay it next time. So if you go back to Facebook the next day, or you click on the Facebook icon in your vault, in your database, it will fill in, it will go to the login screen, and it will automatically fill in your user ID and password in that login screen. That's called autofill. The really nice thing about that is that before it does that, your password manager checks to make sure the domain name of that web page matches the domain name in the database that you previously stored. If it doesn't match, you're being phished, and it will not fill in those credentials. Now, if you as a user think to yourself, something's wrong, I better copy my password and type it in, you've just been phished. So use the protection your password manager provides you. That's really important. If you properly use your password manager, your chance of being phished is very, very low. And of course, you can manually edit the database of entries as well. You don't have to just rely on the auto recording of the websites. Now, why would you trust a password manager? You would trust it because it uses something called end-to-end encryption. That means fundamentally that when your data is stored in the cloud, it's stored in an encrypted form that the password manager company, organization cannot decrypt. And anybody who walks into their data center and walks out with all their hard drives and spends 1,000 years cannot decrypt it either. So your data is a useless blob of information when it's off your devices. On your devices, of course, it's decrypted, but as soon as it goes to the cloud, it gets encrypted. When it comes back to another device to sync it, it gets decrypted. And those encryption keys never reach the service, never reach the server side. They stay on your device. So that's why you can trust it. And I, in fact, trust my password manager with every single bit of confidential and sensitive information that exists for me. And also, password managers get a lot of attention from security researchers. There's a lot of security researchers in the world. There's people who do it from universities for a job. They're doing it for bug bounties. They're getting a lot of attention. The top 3 that are used are 1Password, Dashlane, and 1Password. And Bitwarden is somewhere not too far from there as well. But it's not one of the top 3 for certain. And this thing about end-to-end encryption also applies to Authy, by the way, which I will talk about under 2FA. How to use it properly. So you have to generate a really memorable master password. You want something that is a pretty strong password, but that you're not going to forget. Now, you don't want to pick your dog's name and slap on 123 after it. You want something a lot stronger. So I'm proposing that it should be at least 20 characters long. You can get away with a little bit less, but if you want to do that, you better make sure your password looks really random. Now, how do you make a really random password that you're going to remember? Best scheme I've come across, not my idea, is to make up a little memorable story from your life that you're not going to forget. Take the first letter of each word, convert some of those first letters into digits or symbols as appropriate, make sure there's some punctuation maybe. You've now got 20 more character string that anybody looks at, it looks like it's a random bunch of characters and symbols and digits, but in fact, you know the key, which is your story, right? So you're going to practice that a few times, and you're going to use that as your master password for your password manager. The strength of that master password is the fundamental thing upon which the strength of the encryption of your database is built. So that's important. You're going to put the password manager on all your devices and all your browsers as a browser extension. And then just using a password manager doesn't buy you much. It will get you the anti-phishing, but it won't get you won't get you all the other protections. So you got to start changing all your passwords to big, long, random strings. As I mentioned before, 30 characters long, random. Your password manager will help you generate those random strings. You start that with your most important accounts first. So the most important account you have typically are the email accounts or account that you use to own other services. You've noticed, of course, when you create a new service on any website, first thing it wants is email address. That's an owning email address. That email address owns your account on that service. So if that's your Gmail account, for instance, that Gmail account is pretty darn important. If I can take over your Gmail account as an attacker, I can take over most of your other accounts. So it is really, really important for that primary owning email account you have to be extremely secure. And the way to do that is to make sure the password is random, say 30 characters long. So do that starting with your owning email account, then do it with all your other accounts. If you have accounts where the password's not unique and those accounts are important, change those right away to big, long, random strings. Really important to get the anti-phishing protection. Stop typing your password. Now, if your password's random, it's not in your head, so that's fine. But if you go copy the password out of your password vault and paste it into a login screen, you've just potentially defeated the autofill, and you've potentially been phished. So be really careful when your password manager refuses to fill a website. You could be being phished. Now, don't mix business and pleasure. So create two separate accounts for business and pleasure. Don't put the two in the same account, the same password manager account. Any quick questions on password managers? And I should mention, we'll have a bigger Q&A at the end for more complex questions, but this is like quick things I might have not explained properly.
Yeah, maybe we can give everybody about 30 seconds if they do want to populate a quick question. I know it takes a couple seconds to type things out if you're like a typer like me. So please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Just bring up that disappearing toolbar, and we can take a couple minutes to answer any of your quick questions.
Yeah, and after this Q&A, feel free to type your questions as you go along, and then Shane will look at them when he gets to the next Q&A.
Or at the end as well, for sure. Oh, it looks like we have a question. Great. This comes from Marina. Thank you, Marina, for posing a question. What is the price point for a good password manager?
It's not bad. It's on the order of, say, $40 US, something like that, 40, 50. Now, that's for a single user. Now, it's really important that, if you're in a company, then every employee in the company should be using a password manager, so they have volume licensing and extra features for larger organizations as well, and the price then drops.
Great. That was all the questions at this point, Garland.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so let's say that you buy what I've told you about password managers, and you implement a password manager, and you change all your important accounts to big, long, random passwords, starting with your email address, and you have a little tweaker in the background to every few days go and change more of your passwords, so that over time, every single one of your passwords is going to be long and random and unique. What's the next thing you should do? The next thing you should do is implement two-factor authentication where it's available. Now, not all accounts, not all services you use in the cloud will support 2FA, but usually the important ones will. So if a service supports 2FA, you should automatically use what they offer you, turn it on. Now, 2FA you'll also hear called multi-factor authentication. They are roughly the same thing. Why is it called what it is? Passwords are the first factor of authentication. So your user ID is an identification. Your password then is authentication. It's proving that you really are who you say you are, your identification. A 2FA is a second factor of identification. So one factor of identification is not sufficient. You want a second factor as defense in depth. Now, it's possible that you could get phished even if you're properly using passwords and properly using a password manager, or your password could be stolen from a server for one of the services you use, and then your password escapes into the wild. All sorts of things, bad things can happen. You could have malware in your computer and get a keylogger. There's all sorts of ways that your passwords can get known to attackers. So 2FA provides a second level of defense after that. In security, you always want more than one thing protecting you from a really bad thing. Now, whenever you log in, typically you're going to be asked for a password. You will typically not be asked for your second factor authentication every single time you're asked for a password. You might be asked once a month roughly, but it varies from one service to another. But it's not something that bothers you every single time, it's just occasionally. And then your device will remember a cookie or that kind of thing. So there's roughly 5 types of 2FA you can think of. The top is the best and the bottom is the worst. Now, most people you notice are using SMS 2FA if they use 2FA at all. It's the worst kind for various reasons. You should only use it if the service that you're using doesn't have any other option for 2FA, but all the others are better than SMS. So hardware dongles are the best type entirely, but they're pretty inconvenient. Push is really good. You get a push notification like Google uses. That's very good, but it's limited to very few services. Email verification, which is used by some services, that's number 4. That's not bad. Of course, it depends on how secure email is. And for most people, unfortunately, it's not entirely that secure. Number 3 in the middle is kind of a sweet spot. It's very convenient for users, doesn't require extra hardware, it's free, and it provides pretty darn good security. So it's called TOTP, time-based one-time password. That is essentially, think of it as an app that's going to generate a 6-digit code that changes every 30 seconds. And when you get prompted for it, you just type in the current number, and that's your second factor. You will have heard of Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. Those are both fine. They have some limitations. What I suggest instead you consider is Authy. Authy is a really nice app that will live on all your devices. So it's not only on your mobile device, but also on any computer you have. It is synced in the cloud, or synced using the cloud between all your devices, just like your password manager is. So just like your password manager, when you add a vault entry, a database entry to one device, it suddenly appears on all your other devices. Authy is the same way. When you turn on 2FA and then add a new code to Authy on one device, it suddenly appears on all your other devices. That is extremely convenient from a resilience point of view as well. So I want to suggest you consider Authy. How do you use Authy? So you're going to install it on all your devices. Just like for your password manager, the more devices it's on, the better. Resilience is really good. Devices fail, things go wrong, data gets corrupted. Really important to put it on all your devices. And just like your password manager has this master password that it uses to encrypt your data and sync it to other devices you have, Authy has something called a backups password, which is exactly the same thing. So you're going to create an Authy account and you're going to create a backups password at the same time. And then you're going to use that backups password to log in to Authy on all your other devices as well. So your devices are all now nicely synced together. But again, just like I was saying before, the database is empty right now. Now, the database contains entries, just like your LastPass or your password manager database contains entries. These entries are the name of the entry, like Facebook, and the something called a TOTP seed. And it's this really long number, which is used to generate pseudo-random numbers. I won't go into that, but that's the magic behind this that's the magic behind this 6-digit number that changes every 30 seconds. That TOTP seed, because it's put in all your devices are able to generate that same 6-digit number rotating every 30 seconds. And that seed actually is in the cloud service as well. So the cloud service can then verify that the number you give it matches the one that it's generating in its own server. That's how it verifies that you are who you say you are. So your Authy is going to sync the database between all your devices. When you want to add 2FA to a new web service you have, you're going to scan a QR code, this little thing right here. Where's my mouse? You're going to scan this little QR code from your mobile device. So typically you're going to be looking at a web page and you're going to be scanning the QR code on that web page using your mobile device. And that will instantly add that entry to all your other devices as well. You can then later, when you get prompted to enter the 6-digit number, you can pull up any of your devices, your computer, your mobile phone, your tablet, whatever, get that number from your Authy, type in the 6-digit number, and that's your second factor right away. And you can always edit, manually edit that database, just like with your password manager. And I mentioned before, Authy uses end-to-end encryption as well, so that's why you should trust it. Plus, it gets a lot of attention from security researchers. It's highly regarded in the industry. So using 2FA properly, you want to start turning on 2FA, as I mentioned, for all accounts you own that support 2FA. You want to start, of course, with the highest risk accounts. Your password manager is your highest risk account. As soon as you start using a password manager, it and your owning email accounts, you should turn on 2FA for those right away. And then as quickly as you can, turn on 2FA for all the other ones that support it. So turning on 2FA means essentially you have to log into the service, the web service like Facebook, for instance. You go to the settings. There's an entry there that says two-factor authentication or two-factor verification or something like that. You enable it. It will give you a QR code. You take a picture or you scan that QR code with the Authy app. It instantly adds it to your Authy database. And then most apps, when you turn on 2FA, will give you some recovery codes. These are usually something like 8-digit numbers. They'll give you maybe 10 of them. That's in case something goes wrong. If your Authy, every single one of your devices dies, you lose the Authy database, AWS goes out of business, you've got these recovery codes that bypass the 2FA to log into your account. So it's really important that if the service gives you those recovery codes, you actually record them. And where do you record them? You put them into your password manager. You can print them if you want to as well. But if you put them in your password manager, then even if you're traveling, you can still recover your service if there's a problem. Now, any of you who've been through this might see that there's a little loop here. If you need Authy to get into your password manager and your password manager stores the backup password for Authy, it's pretty important. It's an issue. If you have to ever restore your devices from ground zero, you would be locked out because there's a cross dependency between Authy and your password manager. So really important to store your backups password somewhere outside of your password manager. So there's multiple ways you could do that. You could print it out. You could share it with, two of my friends have shared their Authy backups password with me through their password manager. That's a very secure way of doing it. There's multiple ways of doing that, but make sure somewhere your Authy backups password is available outside your password manager. Now, TFTP is a bit phishable. If you're a really skookum hacker, you've got 30 seconds to collect, to phish somebody, collect their 6-digit number, and then use that to log into their service before they do. So these kind of attacks are not very common, but it is possible. So you should always pay attention, and this is nothing different, right? Any questions on how to use a TOTP authenticator or two-factor authentication in general?
Again, as same as our last two quick question and answer periods, if you do have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, your Zoom screen on that disappearing toolbar, and pose a question, and I can answer, or Garland can answer that question for you.
And I forgot to mention that Authy, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, all those things, they're all free. No, there's no charge for those. You'd be crazy not to use them.
Yeah. I'm reconsidering some of the things that I've been doing, even though I feel like I'm fairly protected. There's definitely some opportunities there.
Yeah, unless you've got really good passwords, you use a password manager, and you have 2FA turned on, you are definitely like a babe in the wilderness today in the big bad world of cybersecurity.
Is there, we do have a question from Donna. She just asked, what did you say are free? You could reiterate that.
Yeah, I said that all of the 2FA services and apps are free. So Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or the one I'm suggesting, Authy, they're all free, no charge for those. And then Bitwarden that I mentioned before for LastPass or for Password Manager is free as well. For the lowest tier, it's free. Okay, why don't we move on if that's it, Shane?
Yeah.
Okay,
back. Thank you.
So it is a really common thing in security that humans are the weakest link. You can buy the most expensive technical security protection measures available on the planet, and humans can completely bypass that with one wrong click on a link, or one wrong open of an attachment, or responding to an email in a wrong way. Humans can bypass the best security measures. And any organization is only as secure as the least security aware or security conscious person in the organization. You can have a 100,000 person company with amazing security awareness training, and if one person doesn't take care, they can ransomware the entire organization. So the really best defense against bad things happening in the digital realm is security awareness. Being aware of what the threats are, what the risks are, how they work, and being aware of each person's role in repelling them. Now, this is an entire hour or more than an hour. So I won't go through in detail here, but if you're in an organization, and most of you are, it's really important that every single staff member get initial security awareness training when they join the organization, and then at least on a yearly basis, with no exceptions whatsoever. The CEO does not get to beg off training because they know this stuff already. The head of IT doesn't get to beg off training. The head of security doesn't get to beg off training. Contractors, volunteers, everybody gets security awareness training, no exceptions, at least annually. And because privacy is a legal requirement, or complying with privacy laws is a legal requirement, privacy should be included as well at the same time. And there are, this is kind of a generic training for all, it's the same training for all employees, but there's always employees and contractors, volunteers, etc., directors. There may be special training required for different teams. So imagine if you're in finance, maybe you want some special training on business email compromise. There are a lot of training providers on the planet that provide canned web-based training. I encourage you highly to use that. Don't try to cook up your own, there's no need to. They're quite reasonably priced. I've listed a couple there. A few tips. So just be aware that social engineering, which is what a lot of the things related to user awareness training come down to, social engineering works. You'd be astounded at how well the stuff works against really smart people. So learn how social engineering works. Social engineering includes things like phishing and ransomware, business email compromise. All those things take advantage of social engineering, which essentially means taking advantage of people's emotions or their inattention, that kind of thing. If you're walking down a street in the middle of the night, you're definitely looking both sides, and anybody suddenly appears on the street, you're paying really big attention to them. Try to put that same kind of awareness and heightened awareness into your use of the internet. The internet is more dangerous than walking down the street. So always pay attention, always be skeptical. If anything comes into you, be especially skeptical. Any inbound request or demand or threat, those things are usually 99.9% of them are social engineering attempts. If you get an email from your boss saying, hey, quickly buy some gift cards, it's urgent, don't talk to anybody, this is a surprise for somebody, don't take it for granted. Call up your boss, talk to them on the phone. And don't go to Google Maps to find a phone number to contact your organization to verify that their rep is really their rep. Google Maps has been spoofed. So go to real authenticated sources to verify information. Don't take anything for granted. That's the key thing. Now, I've finished talking about the main content of what I wanted to talk about today, which was proper use of passwords, proper use of password managers, proper use of authenticators, and user awareness training. But once you've done that, there's 100 other things that you need to do, depending on the size of your organization, to be properly secure. And it does very much depend on your organization. The first few ones, I won't go through these things in detail because that's not this talk, but I want to make sure you're aware that there's a lot more to do before you can feel safer. Now, I won't say safe because you're never going to be safe, but you can be safer than you are today, right? So every organization should be backing up their data. That's pretty obvious. Every organization should be hardening their devices. And hardening your devices means there's a whole bunch of different things to do to do that. Also includes not only mobile phones, tablets, computers, but also routers, networks, websites. And then the bigger the organization, the more people you have, the bigger the complexity of your network, the more customers you have, the bigger your customers, the more money you manage, whatever, the bigger your risks, the bigger your organization, the more risks you face, the more complex your security program needs to be, the more your customers expect from you. And you then start running further down the list. I won't go through this list, but I highly encourage you to request the charts from me and to review this list. Most of you are in organizations who should be doing some of the items on this list. And if you're not, that's a security weakness and a vulnerability, and you could be betting your company, basically. So do review these lists. There's one chart, two charts to go through. That's not everything in the world of security, obviously, but it's the highlights. It's to give you, there's chart number 2 for a second. It's to give you an idea of what you should be thinking about as your organization grows, or as your risks grow, your business changes, whatever. You need to be thinking about these things and realizing whether they apply to you and when they apply to you. Security is usually 80-20 or 90-10. You can get the most bang for the buck from a certain small number of things. But as your organization gets more complex, there's more and more pieces to the puzzle. Now, this is my last chart. So use passwords properly, use a password manager, and use it properly. As I mentioned, just using a password manager isn't sufficient if you don't go change all your passwords to big, long, random strings. You're only getting a small piece of the protection from it. You may feel better, but you're not really helping yourself. Use two-factor authentication. Use TOTP or better. If you can use the better ones, fantastic. If not, then use Authy. If a service doesn't support TOTP, only supports, say, SMS, use it. It's better than nothing. Make sure that the email account that you use to own all your other services is extremely secure. If I take it over, I can take over all your services. The same applies to many other services that use a phone number to own the service. Make sure your phone is, your phone service is pretty reliable, not reliable, sorry, secure. There's various ways of doing that. One of them is putting a special security password at your cellular carrier. Call them up, tell them you want a special security password to block malicious porting. And there's more to do as well. put a pin on your SIM card on your cell phone so that if someone pops out your SIM card, they can't use it. Now, so those are the technical measures. Give privacy or user security awareness training, including privacy, to all your staff at least every year. As your organization grows or as your risks increase, typically as it grows, make sure that you ramp up your security program. Don't just leave it at passwords and 2FA. That's not sufficient. You need a lot more as your organization gets larger. I would argue every single person on the planet should be ensuring every single one of their devices has full disk encryption. If you're on Windows, you need to put BitLocker on your computer. Really important. So there's a lot of things in the ramping up, right? And keep learning. So there's a lot of information on security. There's a few blogs you can follow. If you go to my blog listed below there, you'll see one of my recent blog posts is a good list of security posts. Security blogs that you can follow. About maybe 6 or 7 of them for general security. I highly encourage you to actually follow them and read them every day, 2 days. Start learning a little bit about what's going on, how bad things are in the digital realm. There is also a recent post on my blog on how to follow blogs. So you can use something called a news reader that will easily allow you to follow blogs without having to remember to go check them every day. I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do that. Make your important information come into you in an automated way, and then subscribe using that newsreader to these half dozen blogs and start getting educated and start learning. If you're responsible for the security in your organization, this is extremely critical. If you're not responsible for it because there's somebody else responsible for it, if you're attending this presentation, you probably still want to do a bit of learning. So check out those 2 or 3 most recent blog posts of mine. And if you want the deck from me, please email me. If you have any questions that don't fit in here, or if you have feedback for this presentation, please email me. I'd love to hear your feedback. So we have time now for more complex questions, anything you want to ask.
So again, if you have any questions for Garland, please post them pose them in the Q&A function on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I have a question, Garland. I'm curious, is there, or would you ever recommend some form of password generator program? Is there something online that would generate just kind of random passwords, or do you just rely on the site if they have that already available?
No, you use your password manager. All the password managers, every single one has a password generator built into it. So with 1 or 2 clicks, you can easily generate a 30-character random string, which is exactly what I do for any new account I create.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Very
and
easy.
Are there any sites out there that can show you if your whether it be profile online or even an email address have been compromised before?
Yeah, there is. That's a really good question. There's a site called haveibeenpwned.com, and let me see if I can put it in the chat because it's a little bit hard to. There's Q&A here. Is that the chat? No, it's not.
There is a question that just came in. I didn't know if you wanted to just finish that off, and then I can ask that new question.
Haveibeenpwned.com. Let's see. Haveibeenpwned.com. Right. So this is a really good site. You register. You can use it to check your email addresses, or you can check it and then register them. And anytime in the future, if your email address pops up in a breach, a data breach, you'll get notification. Fantastic site, so definitely use it.
I'm glad I asked that question because I think that's always top of mind for me is, have I ever been hacked, so to speak?
Yeah, it's definitely a really good thing to monitor and be aware of. And everybody has been hacked. It's guaranteed your email address has been caught in some breach. Now, a lot of the password managers have an ability to check that kind of thing as well. 1Password has that built into it. The others have something somewhat similar.
Okay, So we do have a question from Donna. Says, wow, thank you, Garland. If you use, let's say, Amazon and the password was not strong, what would you do with the information that was on the account? Remove it and then add more password protection?
That's a complex question. So if it's like an Amazon login for the admin system, well, two different answers. Okay, so if you have a database sitting on Amazon that's unprotected, sitting on the internet with no password, that kind of thing, you're in big trouble. But if she's talking about the admin system, like the login for the control system in Amazon, not AWS, my apologies. So Amazon, the shopping site. Actually, let's get that clarified. Is she asking about Amazon.ca or AWS?
Donna, can you just clarify that either in the chat potentially?
And anybody else, feel free to ask your questions.
Oh, I believe she just put that .ca shopping.
Okay, so no, there's no need to wipe everything out, but just, and that's the same true for all your accounts. There's no need to clear them and start again, but properly secure them. Put a really strong password on and turn on 2FA. Amazon supports 2FA. Use it, for sure.
Excellent.
Oh,
yeah. Any other questions, guys, before we look at starting to wrap up?
I just realized I didn't actually properly post that haveibeenpwned.com.
Okay.
I'll put it into all attendees. There we go. Okay.
Perfect. I do remember someone some time ago that I knew in the IT world had mentioned, in security world, had said something about that site, but I couldn't remember what it was. That's why I asked that question. So that's great. Thank you for providing that. Great. I think that's all for questions, Garland. I did want to say, obviously, thank you very much for imparting, all of your wisdom and information and expertise, and just taking the time today to really speak to our business community. We appreciate your time and your support.
Yeah, so everybody here, please do ask for the slide deck. All those little tidbits I didn't actually walk through that you should learn or be aware of.
And also just wanted to say thank you again to Associa British Columbia for making this the event possible for all of our members and any future members in our business community so that they can attend. We will continue to stay connected with all of you through regular e-news updates, and we'll be hosting more free monthly business seminars and webinars, I should say, helping you navigate these difficult times. You can see the slide that's up right now. Our next Business Smart session is April the 20th, 9 a.m. with James Grieve teaching us on how to productize your services. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll hope to see you again on another session very, very soon. Thanks again, Garland.
All right, so long.
Have a great week, everybody.